All right, let's jump right into this. If you've ever worked in a corporate environment, you have definitely heard the buzzwords. You know the ones: synergy, innovation, core values. Well, today in this explainer, we are completely demystifying the actual mechanics of corporate culture and leadership. We're going way beyond the standard corporate jargon to uncover the invisible operating system that literally runs your workplace, drives employee behavior, and honestly, decides whether a business is going to thrive or just crash and burn. So, what is your company's culture? Like, really? Take a second to think about your own workplace. I want to challenge a massive misconception right out of the gate here. Culture is absolutely not about having a ping pong table in the break room, mandatory pizza parties on Fridays, or those super glossy core value posters hanging up in the lobby. That stuff, that's not culture. That is just decoration. Here is the crucial takeaway from our source material today. Actual culture equals repeated behaviors reinforced by leadership, incentives, and systems. It is the invisible operating system of a business. It's a shared system of meaning. Basically, culture isn't what a company claims to be, it's exactly what a company repeatedly does, what it financially rewards, and what it normalizes day in and day out through its structure.
Okay, here's our roadmap for this explainer. We're hitting 5 key areas. 1. Why culture is not a slogan. 2. The 3 distinct levels of culture. 3. How leadership is completely different from management. 4. Situational leadership. And finally, 5. How to transform your culture for actual growth.
Section 1. Culture is not a slogan. Let's break the myth of those corporate posters.
Imagine a company boldly claiming innovation on a giant poster right in the main hallway. Sounds great, right? But think about it. If that exact same company systematically punishes any employee who makes a mistake while trying out a new idea, well, they don't actually have a culture of innovation. What they have is a culture of fear. And this brilliantly illustrates the absolute biggest vulnerability in any organization: espoused values, which is what we say we do, versus enacted behaviors, which is what we actually do. The gap between those two things is exactly where organizational trust goes to die. If leadership preaches transparency, but only shares the important stuff behind closed doors, the official values just become a running joke, and the hidden, informal culture takes the steering wheel.
So how do you audit your own team or company? You have to look at the real-world indicators. Ask yourself, who is actually getting promoted around here? What specific behaviors get financially rewarded? On the flip side, what gets silently punished? How do your leaders act when the pressure is really on? And how are mistakes handled when things go wrong? These repeated actions, not the HR handbook, are the real cultural mechanism. When the boss isn't looking, this is the compass your employees use to make their decisions.
Moving to Section 2, the 3 levels of culture. We'll be looking at Edgar Schein's model of organizational depth.
To truly get how culture operates beneath the surface, you have to think of an organization like a massive iceberg. Scholar Edgar Schein breaks this down into 3 distinct levels. Step 1, right at the visible surface, are artifacts. That's your office layout, the dress code, the catchy slogans. Very easy to change. Step 2, just below the waterline, are espoused values, the declared beliefs and official corporate strategies. But Step 3, that is the massive base hidden deep in the dark water. Basic underlying assumptions. These are the unspoken truths of the office. Things like never deliver bad news to the boss, or speed is literally always more important than perfection. Changing a slogan is a piece of cake, but your real culture lives and dies in those deep, underlying assumptions.
Building on that sense of depth, the Competing Values Framework by Cameron and Quinn maps out how varied culture can actually be. It charts culture across flexibility, stability, and internal versus external focus. That leaves us with 4 main types: clan, adhocracy, market, and hierarchy. Now, the absolute genius takeaway here is that there is literally no single best culture out there. It is entirely about what fits your specific strategy. For example, a rapidly growing startup might desperately need the high trust and collaboration of a clan culture early on. But to survive long-term, it's going to have to introduce the fierce, results-driven discipline of a market culture.
Section 3. Leadership differs from management. Let's move beyond mere authority.
We're pivoting now from the group's collective culture to individual influence. And let's bust a huge myth right now. Having a fancy C-suite title does not automatically make someone a leader. Position is just authority. It is not influence. Management is all about planning, organizing, creating stability, and enforcing rules. It's keeping the status quo running efficiently. Leadership, on the flip side, is about visioning, influencing people, driving necessary change, and creating real meaning.
And there's a fascinating tension here. If an organization relies purely on management, it gets stagnant and overly bureaucratic. But if a company has only leadership with zero management discipline, complete and utter chaos. Let's formally define what we are actually talking about here. Leadership is a social influence process to direct, mobilize, and transform organizational energy toward collective goals under uncertainty. Notice the key words there. Leadership isn't some mystical, innate DNA trait you're just magically born with. It's an active, systemic process of social influence. To truly influence your team, you have to build legitimacy, and you do that through obvious competence, clear integrity, and a proven track record of actually delivering results.
Because it is a process. Modern behavioral theory proves that leadership can absolutely be learned. Researchers have identified two vital behaviors you need. First, task-oriented behavior. That's about initiating structure, defining goals, and tracking the hard metrics. But you have to contrast that with people-oriented behavior, which focuses heavily on empathy, consideration, and team support. The most effective companies out there master both. Take Toyota. They balance extreme task structure using their lean manufacturing processes with a deep systemic respect for people and continuous learning directly from their frontline workers.
Section 4. Situational leadership. It's all about adapting your style to the context.
If you have been searching for the single perfect leadership style, you can stop looking today. It's a total myth. The Hersey-Blanchard situational leadership model shows that your effectiveness depends entirely on matching your specific style to the readiness of your followers. If an employee has low readiness, you use a directing style. As they start learning the ropes, you shift to coaching. When they become highly capable, you offer supporting. And for those highly committed veteran experts, you step back and use delegating. This is absolutely crucial, because if a founder uses a rigid, micromanaging directing style on a highly competent veteran employee, they are going to completely crush that person's motivation. You have to adapt to the person right in front of you.
Let's ground all this academic theory with some massive real-world examples. Look at Apple. Steve Jobs brought the intense, visionary leadership needed for crazy breakthrough innovation. But as Apple scaled globally, it desperately required Tim Cook's operational, management-heavy discipline to survive. Or look at Microsoft. Under Satya Nadella, they dramatically shifted their culture from a rigid, competitive know-it-all hierarchy to a learn-it-all growth mindset. That unlocked immense collaboration. In Amazon, they institutionalized their culture with principle-based intensity, systematically ensuring every single decision is driven by extreme customer obsession. Section 5. Transforming for growth. Evolving your leadership and culture to successfully scale. For a company to survive the absolute grind of scaling up, it has to intentionally design its cultural transformation. Let's track a hypothetical growing company. We'll call them Vietdak. They started stage 1 with a founder culture. It's fast, it's passionate, but it is highly dependent on the founder doing everything. To scale, they must evolve to a performance culture, driven by KPIs. Then, they have to become a system culture for standardized operations. Finally, they reach an innovation culture to stay competitive long-term. The fascinating and honestly super dangerous part is that the very same founder traits that launch the startup usually become a success trap. The founder's urge to control everything literally prevents the company from scaling into a system-driven enterprise. So how do you actually make that cultural change stick? Well, our sources give us a definitive formula. It goes like this. Cultural change equals new behaviors multiplied by leadership reinforcement, multiplied by system alignment, multiplied by time. It's basically simple math. If you declare a bunch of new values but you don't align the incentive systems to match them, or if leaders don't actively reinforce those new behaviors when they are under intense pressure, multiply by 0 and the result is 0. Without aligned systems and sufficient time, your old culture is always going to survive. Which brings us to a deeply provocative question I want to leave you with today. Do your leadership decisions actually reflect the culture you claim to have? Remember, true culture is not defined by what is written on a fancy poster in the break room. It is defined by what leaders actually do when faced with incredibly difficult trade-offs. So take this knowledge back to your workplace, start asking those tough questions, and audit your own operating system.